right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 15th, 2021 Left 2 Board meeting. Go ahead and call the meeting to order, and let's start off with a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters, as well as our military. All right, thank you. Got a few things on the agenda today, and I want to say thank you for all of you for taking the time to be here to take care of the important work. First item up for our action is the approval of the minutes. And I have noted here it's the October and November 2021 minutes. Thought we did last month, or did the October ones, but I may have missed that.
Last month we did September. You approved September.
Okay, that's right. So we're going to do in December, we're going to take care of the October and November meeting minutes. So I would entertain a motion to adopt as presented and posted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the October and November minutes. Is there discussion? Questions? Sorry, just checking the chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. Seeing no questions or comments, before you to adopt the minutes, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are adopted. All right, thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is the financial expenditure audit results, and I'll turn it over to Steve for the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Each year, the board does a financial audit. For the last couple of years, that audit has been conducted by the Office of the State Auditor, and that is the case again today. And with that, I will turn it over to Kevin and his team to give you the results of this year's audit and to introduce themselves.
Great. Thank you. My name is Kevin Bush. I'm the audit manager of the team who performed the audit. And before handing it over to Jordan for the presentation, I just wanted to say thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to perform the audit, and we especially appreciate the great cooperation that was given to us during this audit. It went very smoothly, and we very much appreciate that.
All right, so I'll take over. So yes, like Kevin said, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present the results of your audit. My name is Jordan Prince, and I'm the auditor in charge of this engagement. And we have Mike Hutchinson with us today as well, who is the assistant audit manager who supervised the audit. And we have Kevin Bush as well. The purpose of this meeting is to share the areas we reviewed and the results of our audit. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the most important things about audits is their role to increase trust in government. And trust is increased because audits are independent, transparent examinations of the operations of state and local governments. Audits will also help improve efficiency and the effectiveness of state and local governments by identifying areas that can be improved upon. Go to the next slide. Today, we will discuss the expenditure schedule covering the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. The purpose of this audit was to determine if the expenditure schedule was accurate and complete, and the users of the expenditure schedule can rely on the information included. We issued an unmodified opinion, which means there was no materially misstated issues with the expenditure schedule. We conducted the audit in accordance with governmental audit standards and determined there were no significant deficiencies in internal controls and no deficiencies that we consider to be material weaknesses. We also noted no instances of non-compliance that were material to the expenditure schedule of the board. You can see our opinion in the draft report on page 7. Are there any questions? All right, we'll go to the next slide then. So to determine our audit areas, we performed an analytical process to determine the areas that were material to the audit. We determined the following areas to be reviewed: salaries and wages, non-capitalized assets, and contractual services. So we tested salaries and wages for completeness, and this was to determine that all salaries incurred during the period were included in the expenditure schedule. Out of the 12 months of payments, we selected 5 for our testing. We also looked at non-capitalized assets and contractual services for classification, and this was to determine that the expenditures were properly classified in the expenditure schedule. Non-capitalized assets had 5 transactions during the year, and we selected 4 of the 5 of those for testing. And then contractual services had 10 transactions during the year, and we selected 5 of the 10 for testing. Next slide. So we found that the financial statement was clearly and appropriately presented. The note disclosures were complete and accurate, and all significant financial events that occurred were properly disclosed in the notes. Next slide. And that there were no significant uncorrected misstatements. Next slide. Our audit costs were in alignment with our original estimate of $4,720. In the next audit, should the board choose to contract with our office next year, we estimate the number of hours and cost to be approximately the same as this year. Next slide. We expect the board's report to be published on the 23rd. If you haven't already, you can sign up to receive email notifications when reports are released. Also, we will be sending a customer service survey. We encourage you, as well as anyone else that participated in this audit, to complete the survey. Please feel free to forward the survey on to anyone that you might believe would like to share feedback on our services. Next slide. We want to thank officials and staff for timely communication throughout the audit process, and in particular, Seth Glory and Jessica Burkhart for responding to all of our requests promptly. And then next slide. Were there any questions at all? If there's no question, yes?
I have a question for you. I'm just curious, how many of these audits do you do a year?
Of these financial statements?
Yeah.
Well, our team doesn't particularly do the financial statements, but we do statewide single audit, and we have multiple little mini audits in there each year. Not like mini audits, but they're department-wide. We also do accountability. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'd have to defer to Kevin or Mike on how many audits we do. So,
Regarding financial statements at the state level, we do the ACFR, which is the financial statement of the states as a whole. A different team performs that. But as Jordan mentioned, we do financial audits of many different local entities. This particular type of engagement is a little bit unique, and it's we have a handful, but I'd have to look to see the exact number. But it's just a few that are of this type, where they're very specific, targeted type of an audit.
And local agencies, or is it state agencies as well, or is it both combination?
For this type of an audit, there's state agencies is what I'm aware of, as my particular team does not deal with local audits. And there are a handful, primarily engagements that are required specifically by statute that have a focus that is the legislature has specifically defined.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, and we look
All right,
forward
thanks
to
a lot.
the future.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for your cooperation too. Jessica had good things to say about working with you, and we do look forward to working with you again next year.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And again, we appreciate working with you as well.
All right, item number 2 or number 3 on the list. I'm not sure if we're going to change the schedule around a little bit.
Yes, we're shuffling things up just a little bit. Mr. Chair, we're going to move to item 4 on the agenda, the Roth deferred compensation option. This is a final report from Jacob.
Okay, good morning, board members. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. The issue in front of the board today is that left 2 members requested a Roth 457 plan option in the state's deferred compensation plan. The board in 2014 requested the DRS offer a Roth option, actually sent a letter to DRS at that time. but DRS has not yet made that available to DCP plan members. In November, I provided a comprehensive briefing to the board. I'm not going to go through the same level of detail here today, but please feel free to ask any questions you have as I go. So just high level reminder of what a Roth 457 plan is. It allows for deferrals to be made after taxes have been paid instead of before taxes. These after tax contributions are called Roth contributions. Roth contributions to a 457 plan, along with the investment returns on those contributions, are not taxed when a member withdraws them from the plan. The earnings from Roth contributions not being taxed is a particularly significant benefit to younger members enrolled in DCP. And so we do hear more from younger members who are very serious about their retirement, who are aware of this and knowing that they could end up not paying taxes on the earnings later in life. The limits, we often get questions about how this impacts the amount you're able to defer. And so the limits with Roth it's a combined limit for 457 plans. So whether your contributions are Roth or regular contributions, it doesn't impact the limit of what you can defer. So it's this changes year to year usually, but right now it's 19,500. And then if you're over 50, there's an additional 6,500 you can defer. So, and sometimes just a reminder, there's often confusion between a Roth IRA versus a Roth 457. A Roth IRA is a separate benefit with separate limits that anyone can use through the private market. So here we're just talking about the Roth 457 option. So DRS has the authority to offer a Roth option. They don't have to, there doesn't need to be legislation for them to offer that. They have, as I said, so far they've chosen not to offer that option. However, after the Left 2 board first had a briefing on this, and then the select committee ended up also discussing it, DRS decided to pursue a budget request with the governor's office to implement the Roth 457 option. Part of the reasoning of going through a budget request was that if they went ahead and just offered a Roth 457 without that budget request, it would have to be paid for by the administrative fee that members in DCP pay. And if they did the budget request, they could get general fund money to get that money to implement the Roth option. So they decided to pursue that option. And they did file a budget proposal. Unfortunately for the timing of this, that doesn't get released by the governor's office till December 21st. And so here you can see how much that budget request was. And yeah, when DRS speaks later today, I believe they are going to discuss that budget request. So possible legislation, the board may want to endorse legislation in case DRS is unsuccessful with their budget request, or even if it is in the governor's budget, it would still need to get through the legislative process. So the board may be interested in supporting legislation in case DRS is unsuccessful at either of those levels of getting this passed. Staff went ahead and drafted a bill. That bill is in your materials. It would require funding from the state's general fund. It would be for all DCP participants, not just Left 2. Typically, when the board endorses legislation, it's just for Left 2 members. However, in this case, that would add a whole nother layer of complexity for DRS as the administrator to just let Left 2 members have this, and it would not decrease the cost at all to open it all up to all DCP participants instead of just Left 2 members. And then it had we worked with DRS to identify implementation date of when they would be able to do this. And they had already done that work for their budget request. And that date was January 1st, 2024. And that is mostly due to the amount of programming it would take for their systems to be able to identify the difference between Roth contributions and regular contributions. Also did check with the state actuary's office, and they did not need to review this because it does not impact the pension systems. It is just part of the state's 457 plan. Okay, so in front of the board today for possible board action would be to endorse legislation for the state to offer a Roth option in DCP, or to take no action. The board may choose to not pursue legislation this session since DRS has submitted a budget request with the governor's office. The board, however, though, like I said, the board will not know whether that budget request was included in the governor's budget until after today's meeting. And the board may sponsor legislation this session in case DRS's budget request is not included in the budget or is cut from the final budget passed by the legislature. So if there's any questions, be happy to try to answer them. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead. We got, I think, Jason and then Ade. Go ahead.
yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for option 1 to endorse legislation and move it forward.
Motion been made to adopt it. Ade, was your second? Or go ahead.
Actually, I just want to ask some clarification, just so that people that are watching from home can fully understand what this is.
Ade, real quick, Ade, I apologize. I just want to make sure I'm staying right on the process here. So we have a motion. Is there a second before we jump into the discussion? And
Mr. Chair, Jeff Hooley will second in order to foster discussion.
All right, great. So we're under discussion. Ade, go ahead. Sorry, my friend.
Okay, with this plan will not affect the current Deferred 457. Is that correct?
Jacob?
Yeah, it would not affect it, would not impact it. No, it would just give members the option to, choose between whether they want to make their deferrals pre-tax or post-tax.
Okay, good. Also, as usual, this would not increase the cost to the employer at all.
So talk to DRS about that, and they were unclear whether it would, because they don't know. My understanding of it was for the employers to track and report to DRS, there may be, it may depend on their computer systems they use, but it didn't sound like there should be, because DRS would be making changes to their reporting system that the employers use. So there shouldn't be cost, but they were not 100% certain of that.
Okay, but the employers are already reporting to DRS anyway, so even if it's just a little tweak, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, did that answer your questions?
Yes, that did. Thank you.
All right. Are there other questions or comments regarding our motion?
Mr. Chair, it's McElligott.
Yes, sir, Pat.
Just to add on to Ade's, if there is a cost, Jacob, it's pretty much considered it to be de minimis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any hands up. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Nothing in the chat. All right, so we have a motion for option number 1 to endorse the legislation. And I'll make sure we understand it again. Jacob's correct, is that this would be greater than a LEP 2 bill. This would be for all DCPs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
All right. Was there there was no other action on that one right now, correct?
No.
That's it. Okay. All right. So Steve, and I know we were waiting for our director from DRS. Are we going to do something else?
So what we'll do now is we will go to item 3, the DRS annual update.
Okay.
But we've got Seth from DRS, who I understand is going to step in for Tracy. And if that is correct, we'll find out here in a second.
I am here.
All right, there you go, Seth. Thank you.
Appreciate that introduction and vote of confidence. And Tracy will likely be joining us shortly, so it's very likely that I'll just get through the first few slides and then be able to hand it off to her. She had something going until 10 o'clock. So I appreciate the opportunity to give this update. My name is Seth Miller. I am the director of the Retirement Readiness Office at DRS, so primarily working with folks on deferred compensation issues and our Plan 3 investment issues. So, but happy to be here and give you the update on behalf of Tracy and the department. So Tim, if you go to the next slide. Perfect. So just some general information. I know the vast majority of you on this board have been working in pension issues for quite some time. So some of this will be familiar as we talk through the presentation, though try to include some newer stuff near the end as well. But just generally the work that DRS does, over 800,000 folks we have some relationship with across the state. Currently in all of the retirement trust funds, over $170 billion. And generally, annually, we're paying out over $6 billion. And we'll talk a little bit more about where that money goes within the state and how it helps the economy. And generally, we're collecting about $5 billion. So for an agency of just over 260 people, we have a big financial impact on the state of Washington. So Tim, if you go to the next slide. So for your reference, this is first all of the benefits that DRS are paying for all of the retirement systems and how that is spread across Washington. About 87% of the funds that we pay out each year stay within the state of Washington. And I really like to look at this slide. And I mean, even some of our smaller counties, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars a year that are going into the local economy, being likely spent in those communities as well, which I think is a really good success story when we're talking about the pensions within Washington. And you'll hear from other states that don't have that same sort of retention of retirees. Part of that is just how wonderful Washington is to live in, and retirees also love states that don't have income tax. So that helps keep people around as well. So Timmy, if you could look at the next slide, this is broken down specifically for Left 2 benefits that are being paid out. And once again, you'll see, every county in the state is receiving pension dollars that are being spread in those communities. And for some of those smaller counties, probably just a handful of people. But in our larger counties, we're still talking about tens of millions of dollars that are being spent by your retirees in those local communities. So Tim, if you go to the next slide. So I mentioned that I specifically work with the Deferred Compensation Program. Jacob gave a little bit of a primer on that in his earlier presentation. We've seen a lot of exciting growth in the Deferred Compensation Program over the last couple of years. Since 2017, all state employees, newly hired state employees, are automatically enrolled into the program. And that's really a best practice within retirement benefits offered by employers. We really have seen great success with that. Over 90% of the people who are automatically enrolled in the program stay in the program. And one of the reasons that's important is we know folks are getting a pension. The vast majority of folks who are participating in the pension systems are also receiving Social Security. But for folks who have kind of just an average length of career, those two sources of income likely will not be enough to replace their working income. And so having some supplementary savings is really important for folks. And the earlier you start, and I know this is common knowledge for many of you, the earlier you start, the better off you are. And so by auto-enrolling people as soon as they start employment, we can help them save earlier, and then usually have to save less total money out of their check, but save more in their account balance when they actually retire. So we're pretty proud. We just passed $6 billion in assets, which makes us one of the largest 457 plans in the country. And it's really exciting. So Tim, if you want to go to the next slide, and I will talk about this one. And then I saw Tracy joined us, so I will then turn it over to Tracy. So I actually spoke to the board earlier in the year. I think it was one of the first meetings of the year regarding the department's re-review or continuing review of disability, of catastrophic disability retirees specifically. We had sent out notice to folks that we were going to be reviewing their continual qualification for catastrophic disability. For those of you who are less familiar, LEF 2 has multiple tiers of disability benefits, and catastrophic disability benefits being caused by the most severe disabilities. And there's a little over 50 people who are currently receiving those benefits, which include pension benefits and medical coverage reimbursement. But folks who qualify for that benefit can't be able to perform substantial gainful activity, other work, even work outside of law enforcement or firefighting. And so there's a process that we've developed. And then over the last year, we've been working with the LEF 2 board staff on making clarifications in the WAC and improving the communication that's going to be sent out to those members. So the first thing we'll be doing next year, starting in April, is a financial review. Folks who qualify for this benefit can't have income over a certain threshold. That threshold is set by the Social Security Administration. And we'll be doing a financial review of those folks in 2022, and then starting, hopefully, medical re-reviews or medical continuing reviews in 2023, either on a 3-year cycle or a 6-year cycle, depending on the severity of the person's disability, or really, I shouldn't even say severity, the expectation of improvement or stability the last time they were reviewed. So if a person was not if they were fixed and stable and not expected to have any improvement with their last medical review, we would not be reviewing them more than every 6 years. With also the caveat that once people are over the age of 65, they wouldn't have any additional reviews. So I'm going to pause here and just see if there's any questions before I hand it over to Tracy. I know this had been a topic of conversation in earlier meetings.
Beth, I'll ask a question. You just mentioned the financial reviews.
Yeah.
Is that based upon a single income, or is that a family income? How's that?
That's a good question. It is really based on their income. And we know this is going to be complicated for folks who are married. It's also going to be complicated for folks who may not file taxes because they don't have any income. It's always difficult to prove that something doesn't exist. And so we know this is going to be a challenge, and we want to work with the retirees on what they can provide. And we know it's going to, for some folks, it's going to feel invasive, and we're trying to be as transparent with what we need from folks and be as accommodating through the process. But yeah, it is just their income. And it's also, want to clarify, it's not investment income or things like that. It's really income from working what triggers that threshold. And so we may have to ask clarifying questions based on the information we receive as well.
What about on the review process for the medical piece? How is it handled for people who live out of state?
Yeah, so we have contact, and actually probably a higher proportion of these retirees live out of state than what I was speaking about earlier. But very similar process, we'll be in contact with them. They may also file state tax returns. So if they file state tax returns where they live, that could be a review. For the medical, it's the same. They're entitled to the same benefits. They may have to search a little bit more for coverage that depending on where they're living, what sort of insurance options are available for them, but the process will be the same.
Questions? Any other questions for staff? I'm not seeing anything on the screen or in the chat, so is that I'm just turning it over to Tracy, or I'm not.
Yeah, let's see if Tracy's. I think Tracy's here.
I am. I'm here. Thanks, Seth, for starting this presentation. I apologize. Ever since we do everything virtually, meetings are back to back and you don't have any travel time. So sorry that I wasn't here at the beginning. For the record, I'm Tracy Guerin. I currently serve as the Department of Retirement Services Director. And I appreciate you having us here today to give you an update on where we're at, and appreciate Seth doing the first half of the presentation. So to continue on, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing with our hybrid workforce, as everyone is doing now. We're trying to figure out what does that look like? What does that look like in terms of providing customer service? So beginning in January of 2021, we started offering Zoom appointments. I don't know if you've heard that from many of your members. We've gotten pretty high marks on that. People can go in through their OAA account and actually sign up for that Zoom appointment. They're about 30 minutes. And since we were unable to offer in-person services, Zoom was our next best choice. And we're going to continue doing Zoom appointments, and for the foreseeable future, not actually have customers come into the building and have one-on-one counseling, just because of the various variants and so forth that we have floating through our state. We have seen a total of 1,360 members so far on Zoom, which is about 151 a month. We also have provided a drop box in the front lobby, and it's secure so people can drop off documents if they choose to do that. We also had a soft opening on December 1st of this year, where people can actually come in, drop off documents, ask basic questions. We are setting it up now to be middle of January, where if someone comes in and their question is overly complex and we can't just spend 10 minutes talking with them, or it's highly personal information, we'll offer to make a Zoom appointment for them. So if they don't have an OAA account that's active, and we'll actually make the appointment for them, and then they can meet with us on a one-on-one situation. The RSs have begun, the retirement specialists have begun transitioning back into the building to do work. It's 1 day a week during December. It'll be 2 days a week in January. And then in February, it will be 3 days a week. So certain positions and certain people, depending on their productivity, will be eligible for 2 days of telework a month ongoing after March. Now, I always like to talk about how small but mighty DRS is. So I'm going to give you a few data points. So during calendar year 2020, the team processed almost 30,000 estimates. We completed about 13,000 retirement calculations, performed over 7,500 recalculations, completed over 4,500 withdrawals, answered over 127,000 phone calls, and responded to over 39,000 emails. And I share those numbers because I think that it's remarkable, the volume of transactions that we put through the department. And we do that with the same number of FTEs. So we have not added FTEs in retirement services for many years. We were fortunate to get a few FTEs in this last budget cycle, but it really isn't enough to keep up. And frankly, Tim, if you want to go to the next slide, I know Mark has talked to you often about our benchmarking process and what a great job we do at how we stack up, and about how low cost Department of Retirement Services is. That's not always a good thing, right? Low cost sometimes means that you can still provide high customer service, and sometimes it means that you're not providing great customer service. And I'm afraid that we're starting to dip down into that, where we continue to be low cost. We continue to not add staff, which is the most expensive thing that we can add. And we continue to not update our admin structure in terms of information technology. And we continue to be low cost. And now, as you can see here, we are 31% below the pure average in numbers of FTEs. And we're experiencing lower customer service and lower customer satisfaction. So if you want to go to the next slide, Tim. So again, as you can see, the total transactions have just really increased. We continue to have the number of death transactions have tripled since 2013. You can see here, the member withdrawals have increased by about 70% over the same time period. The increase of Plan 3 members retiring since the plan has matured is lengthening our phone calls. I was just talking to the RSD assistant director, and some people are waiting up to 30 minutes to get through on our phone queue. The percentage of incoming calls answered within 30 seconds has dropped from 89% in 2013 to 24% in 2020. That's just not acceptable. The average number of days to complete requests for retirement estimates has increased from under 3 in 2013 to 9 in 2020. So that's tripling the number of days that it takes to complete an estimate. You have to have an estimate before you can retire. As we experienced with the Great Resignation, when there was a mandate for vaccination, we were running overtime in order to make sure that we were able to process those estimates for people who suddenly decided to retire because of the vaccine mandates. We were able to get everybody retired, but it was not easy. And it, again, impacts other customer services like estimates being done for people who weren't retiring in October or November. It impacted our ability to answer phone calls and so forth. So after all that bad news, Tim, do you want to go to the next slide? What are we going to do about this? Well, we went into the governor's budget asking for additional FTEs, specifically in retirement services, to address these customer service impacts that we're experiencing. We asked for 20, I think it was 28 FTEs, forgive me, I can't remember now. It was over 20 FTEs. We're hoping that we do get that and that rolls through the entire budget process in the House and the Senate and comes out in conference so that we can start addressing these severe, I believe, severe decrease in customer service levels that we're experiencing. We've also asked for funding from general fund, not from the administrative funds in retirement, but general fund, to provide a Roth option for deferred compensation. And the reason is we've had a number of members ask for that, but in looking at the impact to rates, it would have increased rates pretty remarkably. So we said, we don't want to do that. Not all members are going to participate in Roth. We don't believe that all DCP members should pay for that implementation of it. So we actually asked for general fund state in the governor's budget. And then finally, we also asked for some funds to finish an implementation that we did not complete because of not getting information from the IRS. But my real focus here is to talk about, we know our service levels are down. I hope your members are not being impacted. I hope you're not hearing about that from them. We're working hard to get new team members on the phones quicker. Usually it's 8 months. We're rolling them on in about 3 to try to impact that long wait time on the phones. We're also trying to implement some technology that will hopefully help as well with that. So with that, those are all my prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tracy, so I have to say, since I've been associated with DRS, the service has just been outstanding. I mean, from the time I was hired till the time I retired, and even past that. And you're requesting 20 new FTEs. And we all understand politics. How do you, in your case, talking with people and understanding what's going on, what do you feel your chances are of getting those people on board?
I think that our chances are pretty high since I've joined the department. I've been with the department for 6 years. And we've had several pretty significant budget requests that have been approved by the governor and the Senate and the House. One was to remodel the building and including getting a generator. We had been down a few times where we were down for a couple of days because of electrical issues. We got funds for that. We got funds to start replacing all of our technology. So we've moved into the cloud, for example, and off of the mainframe. And we just in the last biennial budget cycle received the funding that we requested to rebuild our basic retirement infrastructure, IT infrastructure. So I feel good about it. We are very data driven when we make our requests. So we're able to show the customer service impacts and that we have not added FTEs in retirement services division for over 20 years. Last year, when right before the budget came out, we went in and said, hey, we're starting to see these impacts. Can you give us a few FTEs so that we can at least start a new class sooner? And we were granted that sort of in the last ditch effort to get that done when we started seeing this trend. So I feel good about it. I feel that we have good data. We're able to tell our story and we're able to support our story.
Well, I think, Tracy, and just to follow up, and we have members, and we're not the only retirement group, as I know, but we do represent the left. We are always trying to expand our benefits and do things for the membership, but with that comes hours of work that needs to be done by DRS.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, we need to make sure that we keep focus, whatever you need from this board, working with the chair and also Steve, to make sure that we know that if you need help at the legislature, that we'll be there for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And that's my Merry Christmas.
You too.
Jason, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Tracy. Jason Granum in Clark County, Washington. I'd like to echo what Pat said. The customer service with DRS has always been way above par. I've been on the board for 6 years now, and that's what I've always heard. We all find ourselves in this difficult situation with COVID and working from home. And I have had individuals in Clark County in my area that are retiring that are experiencing difficulties in communications with extended lead times on getting estimates specifically. And I don't say that as a complaint. I say that is to echo what you presented here this morning and also bring attention to the facts that you presented. And clearly you need more staff. And requesting those 20 FTEs, I think, is completely reasonable. And Pat, as usual, stole my thunder. And I would also like to advocate that for you that the left board is behind you. We support DRS in your effort and your mission, and anything that we can do to help this situation that we all find ourselves in move forward, and so we can service our members better, so you can service them better, all for. But I do know that you have very difficult jobs like we do in managing this and doing this in this environment we find ourselves in. So I thank you very much for you and your staff, Tracy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I, as I said, I was just speaking with Candace, and she let me know that I think we have 15 more estimates to do for folks who are looking to retire in January and about 1,100 in February. So we're running overtime on Saturdays so that we make sure that we get those done. But they are a long lead time. And, I appreciate you letting me know that there are some folks in Clark County experiencing that and that they're sharing it with you. And I'm sorry to hear it, because we do pride ourselves on customer service. And even with getting these FTEs, it's going to take a while to get them hired and trained. And it's really tough hiring people, by the way. People are not super excited about working right now. So if you know anybody who wants to work at a great place, ship them my way.
Yes, we're experiencing the same thing in law enforcement.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there.
All right, any other questions or comments for Tracy?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ade.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. I think, as some of my colleagues have said, I think the relationship between the LAIF board and the Department of Revenue, Department of Retirement has been really, really great. And thank you for the excellent job that you've been doing since you joined the Department of Retirement. But several months ago, one of our members came to the board. I think that was the former chief of police for the city of Federal Way that moved from LAIF retirement into post position. I think his case went all the way to the court and he won. I think one of the suggestions that he made at the end of his presentation was how we can prevent what happened to him from happening in future, because I think he spent, almost about 100,000 litigating the case. So, I just, again, as some of my members, my colleagues have said, we are here to serve our members. And this individual is also a member of LAIF too. So is there anything that we are putting in place to prevent what happened to him? Because based on his comment, he requested information from a Department of Retirement, and they advised him he would be okay. And after he jumped from being chief of police to the being a city regular employee, Department of Retirement changed the rules. I hope you understand what I was referring to.
I think I do. And let me share a conversation I was having yesterday. And Seth, are you still here? You are. Seth, yep. If I misspeak, help me out here, okay? So one of the challenges, and maybe it wasn't Seth I was talking to, it might have been Mike, but at any rate, is that when the way that the department has historically interpreted a DRS covered employer, it is regardless of which plan they're in. And so depending on how they retire, they may or may not be able to work for a DRS covered employer. So I have two answers for this. One is, I think we need to re-ask the question of our attorney generals, assistant attorney generals. How should we be describing a DRS covered employer? Is it for a plan, or is it any of the plans that DRS covers, right? Because that can impact moving from a police department, for example, to the county, right? So right now, the interpretation from our assistant attorney generals has been, those are all the same employer, and you can't, if you retire early under an IRF, you can't move from one to the other without losing your retirement. The second question is, or the second thing that we need to do, is talk to our retirement service specialists and have them ask that next question of, oh, are you moving from one plan to the other because that's still covered as a DRS covered employer? And we think that we're not 100% certain all of our retirement specialists understand that. So two answers, neither one of them great, but I think, Seth, did I cover that reasonably well?
Yeah, and
he doesn't really sound convinced, so he's going to fix whatever I said.
You specifically said when I hesitate after one of your answers, that's usually a scary sign.
Yeah.
So I was trying not to hesitate too much. Yeah, but I think everything you said is right. And Ade, I appreciate the question as well. I think it is oftentimes difficult to know exactly what a person is trying to do in a situation, and for our retirement specialists, we oftentimes need to ask more questions, and trying to figure out where things are documented and making sure that we're getting all the necessary information. And I know we have already put some things in place regarding that specific situation, and I would certainly be able to share that with the board staff after the meeting, so they could get that to you as well.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Wolf, go ahead.
Good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Wolfgang.
Hey, how are you?
Fine, and yourself?
Doing well. Good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. I was reminded listening to it and looking at it of some work that we did at the Treasurer's Office a good while back now that's certainly aged a bit, where with Jim McIntyre at the time, we had an interest in trying to describe what Washington State does and how it handles pensions generally. And of course, we had a rating agency component and an investor and bond buyer component for an audience well beyond what we normally talk about. But one of the things that we were trying for was to put in one place in a relatively straightforward way the whole story. And your story is out of necessity about the pension fund administration that you're charged with. The main job at DRS with some tinges and hints of policy and policy direction. SIB's story is about investment, but never tells the story about pension fund administration. Nobody tells the story about plan configuration and the underlying policy choices that have been made in 1977 to be very disciplined. And nobody separately tells the story about the actuary's role and the pension funding council and the legislature and OFM's role. So we thought there was benefit in trying to put it all in one place. And I think we added some value in doing that. Have you all thought about, and maybe going back to the treasurer to do it or to somebody else to do it, or maybe OFM, or you guys leading it, wherein we could have another go at that? Because there's so much strength in our system, but it's very hard to explain. And we get classed with Illinois and with Kentucky and with, there's all these problems, except we don't have them. Yeah. And here's a long list of reasons why, but we're not very good at voicing that. Is that something you could grow out of your presentation and maybe reach out and add some things to?
So what we do specifically for the members of the Select Committee on Pension Policy, when new members come on, I actually go and brief them and talk to them about just what you're talking about, how the whole system works, and that DRS is one piece of it, but there's these other components, and that we have a left board. I'm sorry, my light is. We have a left board, and we have the Select Committee, and we have the Pension Funding Council, and we have this State Investment Board, and all of the different pieces. And interestingly enough, I always get a lot of bites about wanting more information. And we do that with the Select Committee on Pension Policy, and we also do it with any new fiscal chairs, because that's where our policy runs through. And so we haven't put it down, pen to paper, but we do go and share that. And I always like to take that opportunity to get Mark in front of him so that he can talk about our benchmarking, and WSIB also does benchmarking as well, and just talk about overall how we're funded, so that we can talk about the unfunded liability and all of the different pieces that employers are paying, so they have a good understanding of why employers come back and sometimes have concerns about what the rates are for pensions. So we do our best that way, but we've not thought about putting it down on paper, but that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, we've just encountered so much mythology and so much sort of odd perspective and thinking over the years about what these systems are and aren't, and what people believe them to be or not, and the sort of mythology and disbelief when people see that actual system. It's like, really?
Yeah,
that's how that works. Yeah, but it's hard to do unless somebody synthesizes a whole story. Yeah, and our governance and our structure of administration is not compatible with attempting to tell it all, because nobody is in charge of it all in one single place.
Yeah, I feel fortunate that I get to play in multiple of the spaces, but yeah. No one's in charge, that's for sure.
But I think as you direct DRS, but now come in as chair at SIB, you might be in the embodiment of the ability to synthesize some of that, just because you'll have those two roles.
Yeah, so. Yeah, for sure.
Other questions or comments? Tracy, I think you answered everything.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the time, and I really appreciate the support. And you know, if any of your members are having issues, please feel free to reach out to myself or Seth or Candace, and we'll do our very best to get them taken care of. Happy holidays.
Can we get your cell number? Just kidding.
Yeah, you sure can. You can call me anytime. I think Steve's got my cell number.
We all have it. We all have it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
And I
Go ahead, Steve.
wanted to mention as we jump into the next topic, it has been a very cooperative relationship with DRS. Seth talked about one of the projects that we've been working on with them over the last year, but there have been 6 others that he didn't mention. We meet with them monthly to talk about mutual issues, and it's a cooperative working relationship with them, very professional. With that, Mr. Chair, item 5 on the agenda, the tiered multiplier benefit. This is the final presentation from Jacob. After discussions last month with the actuary about implementing a policy in this bill, there'll be a need to take a vote, and Jacob in the actuary's office will walk you through that as part of this presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob.
Okay, for the record, for I believe the last time this interim, Jacob White, staff to the board. So the issue in front of the board today is that a benefit improvement purchased using the benefit improvement account should meet the policy goals of the Left Plan 2 board, while also adhering to the legislative intent of the benefit improvement account. The board has received a lot of briefings on this issue this interim for me, so I'm not going to go over all the detail we've discussed. Instead, I'm going to focus on the benefit improvement the board outlined during last month's board meeting for further analysis, update you on the bill draft, and then hand it off to Mitch at OSA to brief you on the actuary's analysis and to go over the board policy options for potentially endorsing legislation this upcoming session. So a reminder of what the benefit improvement the board voted on for further analysis at last month's meeting. So that benefit improvement consisted of a $100 per month of service lump sum payment for retirees with a minimum of $20,000 for catastrophic and duty disability retirees and duty death beneficiaries. A tiered multiplier benefit that would increase the plan benefit multiplier from 2% to 2.5% for the years of service for active and new members from years 15 through 25. And then also the board voted that to develop a policy in consultation with OSA that allows the assets in the BIA to offset the increase in liabilities from the benefit improvement so that there's no increase in required contributions. So I showed you these tables last month. I'm not going to go over them in detail. Just want the board members to be aware that these exist, that they are in both obviously the PowerPoint presentations on our website and then also in the report that go along with this. These have been useful. I've received questions already from members and others about what benefit they might qualify for in their specific situation. So these tables were just an attempt to go through all of those possible situations and to clearly identify which of those benefits members would qualify for. For most members, I should say it's pretty simple. They fall into one of 3 categories, and they're all based on that February 1st, 2021 date that we've discussed in the past. For retirees, people who've retired before February 1st, 2021, they would qualify for that lump sum payment. If they are active as of that date, they would have a choice between a lump sum payment or the tiered multiplier. And people who are new after that date would qualify just for the tiered multiplier. Here on this screen is just the retired member table. And then on the second screen is the active member table. And then lastly, the simplest table, the new member table. So then I briefly wanted to go over the sections of the bill draft. Once again, not going to dive into all the detail, but just wanted to touch on those different sections in case there were any questions about them. So the first two sections, pretty simple. Well, actually not very simple at all, but we've already discussed them. They lay out the benefit improvements I just discussed. The section 3 is a $20,000 minimum annuity purchase that members who receive a lump sum will be able to purchase an annuity from DRS, and that annuity would have a minimum of $20,000. Currently, the minimum annuity is $25,000, but we're offering it at $20,000 because that is that lump sum payment that catastrophic disability, duty, and then duty death survivors would receive. So wanted to be clear that they would be able to purchase an annuity if they would like with that lump sum payment. Should also add that rollovers would be allowed to assist with that purchase of an annuity as long as it's from an IRS qualified plan. And then section 4 and 5, this puts the current left to minimum contribution rate that the board has adopted in policy into statute. I did want to say here too, for those who have looked at the bill draft, just yesterday, me and Steve did identify that there was a need for some clarification in that language. The section of existing statute that went into had to do also with the minimum contribution rates of the other systems and plans. And those other systems and plans are subject to review by the Pension Funding Council. And so we want to be extra clear that this new section for the left to minimum contribution rates is not subject to that review from the Pension Funding Council. Just want to be as explicit about that as possible. So we'll make that amendment if this moves forward. And then section 6 freezes the current contribution rates for the 2022, 23, and 23 through 25 biennia. I should add that rates could still go down, but they could not be raised. And then section 7, this transfer of funds to fully pay the difference between the value of the BIA and the cost of the benefit improvement identified by OSA. So wait for OSA to identify the cost of that and then transfer the difference between the existing amount of money in the benefit improvement and what the benefit improvement will cost. That'll be transferred to the BIA, and then the next section actually transfers that money back into the trust fund to follow through with the purchase of the benefit improvement. And then section 8 is just a placeholder, and this is the possible offset language that OSA is going to discuss in more detail the options in front of the board today. And then there were some important dates in the bill that I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. The one date that we've discussed the most is the February 1st, 2021 date. But there are some other significant dates in here that members may have questions about. The June 30th and July 31st one, those ones I don't expect members to have questions about, but those were dates identified in the bill. I worked with DRS, and DRS worked with the State Investment Board, and we left those dates a little open as far as by June 30th instead of on a specific date. And that was to just make sure that there were no issues caused by a specific date and the existing administrative processes that the State Investment Board has for valuing funds. So this gives them some leeway to work that into their existing processes. And that was kind of driven by, there's been transfers in the past where there were some workarounds that had to happen. So wanted to make sure that we didn't cause any extra administrative work for our partner agencies. And then lastly, the January 16th, 2023, that ends up being the effective date of the tiered multiplier and lump sum benefits. And so that was in our in working with DRS and reviewing this potential benefit improvement, takes into account the time it would take to implement, and then fitting it into their existing processes at DRS to make those lump sum payments. And then after drafting the bill, we shared that with Department of Retirement Systems and obviously the State Actuary's Office, but DRS, we shared it with them to get some feedback on any potential administrative issues that we hadn't thought of. And they were very helpful with that. And they decided to go ahead and go beyond that and complete a draft fiscal note, and got that to us in time to be able to share with you. So it's in your materials. It was $252,000 to implement the bill over the 21-23 biennium. And also really appreciate this, that DRS went ahead and shared a draft with their tax counsel, Ice Miller, so that if this does move forward, there would be less likely to be any surprise issues during session with any potential plan qualification issues from the IRS. And so, yeah, Ice Miller did that review, and they did not identify any potential plan qualification issues. And then, like I said, the state DRS also has reached out to the State Investment Board to work on that transfer section to make sure those dates worked for everyone. And then, yeah, so if there's any questions on anything I've shared, next I'm going to hand it off to Mitch if there aren't any questions at this point.
Questions? I'm not seeing anything. Jacob?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Mitch.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Mr. Chair, members of the board, for the record, Mitch DeCamp, Office of the State Actuary. So I'll be presenting with Lisa Wan today, our Deputy State Actuary, and we'll be covering the results of our pricing on the benefit improvement. So I'll be covering most of the pricing results today, and then Lisa will handle some consulting around options before the board today. So starting off with our first slide, a big slide of actuarial assumptions and disclosures. I apologize for that. I don't usually make you look at this until the end of the presentation, but there's just a few things I want to touch on here before we do actually look at any results today. The first thing I want to point out is that this is an estimate. We are firmly in estimate territory with all the results we're going to look at today. It's so important that I even underlined the word estimate on the slide. That's just where we had to be in order to produce results for this meeting. We think that we're going to be mostly there with this estimate, but there could be changes for a final fiscal note during the session. So some of the reasons that we are in estimate territory right now is that this is still draft bill language. Any changes to that bill language is going to get us different results. And then the other reason is we did rely on some simplified assumptions and methods. Wherever we land on final assumptions and methods, again, that's going to change the results. So as we go through this, I have a couple slides where I am going to point out some of those simplified approaches that we took, and then where it might look different in a final fiscal note. Really, the big thing is here is we don't want to surprise you from what you see today from what ultimately lands in a fiscal note. So with that, there we go. So here is our summary of the estimated impacts from the draft bill. Let's go ahead and work through the table here, starting with the total liability change. So the total liability change for LEF 2 came in at just over $1.1 billion. That is broken down by active members and then the lump sum that is payable to annuitants. For the active members, came in at about $985 million, and then that annuitant lump sum was $141 million. As Jacob said, there is then a transfer from the BIA into the LEF 2 trust. Those BIA assets then help to offset the liability change. Those BIA assets were $393 million. So then kind of putting it all together here, the total cost of the plan, subtracting A from B, we get $733 million. So a few notes on what we're looking at here and some things that could change in a fiscal note. First of all, that annuitant lump sum. So we, OSA, estimated that from our internal data. We expect that during a fiscal note in session, DRS would calculate that figure and actually give it to us. But right now, just an estimate. The second thing I'll point out is that the results that we're looking at in this table, these are all measured at June 30, 2019. So we took our latest rate setting valuation, and then we used some updated assumptions. Specifically, the updated assumptions that had the biggest impact were those new economic assumptions that the board adopted last meeting. Last note here on the BIA assets, how we got to that $393 million figure. So we started with the BIA assets as of June 30, 2021. So after the big returns in the market, we then discounted that 2 years to 2019 to our valuation date. So that way we have lined up the liability change and the assets all on the same date. And that's just standard actuarial practice, how we do our work. So what you're looking at here, we would consider this sort of our closed valuation results. We also have done some projections on this bill, and the board has seen some presentations of ours with projections. It's typically projected funded status and contribution rates. We're going to get to those, and that'll be later in the presentation. Now I'm going to take that table we just worked through, and I'm just going to add one section to it, the total employer budget impacts. So this is a benefit improvement. So there is increases to the aggregate contribution rates. Those are the board's underlying cost method, as well as the minimum rates. And it's those minimum rates that the board typically uses for adopting contribution rates. And we came up with these budget impacts by showing those changes in minimum rates. Looking at the budget impacts, we do see something kind of weird in those first two biennia. We actually see a very slight savings, and that's because the bill caps the rates, the currently adopted levels for those biennia. And then as part of this benefit improvement, we assume slightly higher rates of retirement. When members retire earlier, there's less members to contribute to the plan. When it's over the same contribution rates, we see those small savings. However, the 25-year impacts, though, that came in at $631 million, and that's using the board's current funding policy. I will point out here that that $631 million, that is without any potential funding policy adjustments that, again, we'll talk about later in the presentation. So now I've taken the table we just walked through, and then I've compared it with the bill from the 2021 session. That was SB 5453. I thought this was a good comparison because the bill provisions are really similar, but they're not identical, and we now have slightly different assumptions. So I wanted to put it side by side so we could compare the results. So starting with the total liability change, about 140 million additional in total liability change from SB 5453 to the draft bill. That's for a few reasons. The first one, we now have new economic assumptions, again, which the board adopted at the last meeting. Additionally, the draft bill, it provides benefits to more members and provides some larger benefits. For more members, terminated vested members are now eligible for the benefit under the draft bill, and there is a lump sum that is now provided to active members with under 15 years of service and annuitants with under 15 years of service. Additionally, the annuitant lump sum, it's also larger because the lump sums are larger. In SB 5453, they were capped at $20,000. Everybody got $20,000. In the draft bill, they are $100 per month of service. Left to service tends to be pretty high, so average lump sum came in at about $29,000 for each annuitant. So almost a 50% increase in the lump sum going from 5453 to the draft bill. So to the BIA assets, not surprising, the BIA assets are larger under the draft bill. That's because we're now reflecting the large return from 2021. However, the total cost of the plan is still a little larger under the draft bill. And then it follows as well that the total budget impacts are a little higher as well. So with that, my next slides get into some of our assumptions and methods, and then we'll get into the funding policy option. But before I do that, that was a lot of numbers I threw at you, so I want to pause and see if there's any questions. I'm also happy to answer questions at the end.
Any questions? Not seeing anything, Mitch?
Okay, I'll continue. Simplified assumptions and methods. Yeah, really riveting title slide there. I really just want to cover some of what we did on the assumptions and methods that I think are going to change in a future fiscal note. The first one, we used the same retirement rates assumption for this draft bill as we did for 54, 53. As we just looked at, the provisions are similar but not identical, so we are going to look at those retirement rates assumptions again. And then under the draft bill, members with 15 or more years of service have the option to either select a lump sum or select the increase in their multiplier. For most members in this area, the multiplier is more beneficial. However, there are some members maybe at that lower end, 15, 16, 17 years of service, that the lump sum may be more valuable. It's really going to depend on the member and what their current salary is. However, for this estimate, we just assumed all of those members would select the multiplier. We will revisit that in a future fiscal note as well. Last thing, I mentioned this a few slides ago, the lump sum payout to annuitants, we estimated that and expect to get that from DRS for a future fiscal note. The last thing we didn't include, because it wasn't really an assumption or method, but the draft bill had some partial language for a funding policy adjustment. The bill didn't define that mechanism, so we didn't include it in the results, although we expect it'll obviously be there in a future bill. But just a quick reminder on what is actually going to be in our actuarial fiscal notes. I know all of you read our fiscal notes from cover to cover, so this is probably a review. I'm just going to go through it quickly so you know what is going to be in there. Page 1 of our fiscal notes, this is our high-level summary. It's going to be a lot of the same information we looked at a few slides ago. Contribution rate impacts, 2 biennia plus 25-year budget impacts, and highlights from our analysis. Then in the body, we're going to have details of all the provisions of the bill. Who is impacted, what are the costs, and then detailed fiscal impacts for each provision. That transfer, there's a section in the draft bill that has the transfer of assets from the plan to the BIA, and then the BIA back to the plan. We'll show all of that in the body of our fiscal note. In there will also be more details on the benefit improvement, changes to funding policy, and then risk analysis as well. What's not on here, which is in our fiscal notes, is we do have an appendix that has some very detailed actuarial information. That's really meant for other actuaries when they're assessing our work. But again, feel free to swim in those waters if you dare. So I want to cover a couple of the provisions in the draft bill that impact funding policy. Specifically, the draft bill adds the board's minimum rate policy into statute. That minimum rate policy is 90% of the minimum rate when funded status is 105% or more, or 100% of the minimum rate when funded status is less than 105%. Those minimum rates, those are equal to the normal costs under the EANC cost method. That's a mouthful, so that's why we typically just refer to it as the minimum rates. The big note here for the minimum rates is the minimum rates are not impacted by changes in assets. They are, however, impacted by the benefit improvement. So the benefit improvement comes in, increases the minimum rates, but when the BIA assets come over, there is no corresponding decrease in the minimum rates. So as I said a couple slides ago, the draft bill included some language for adjusting these minimum rates to help manage costs from the benefit improvement. But again, the mechanism for adjusting those rates wasn't defined. So what we've done here is that we have brought some funding policy options for you to consider that will adjust the minimum rates. And when we came up with these options, we were trying to think of options that are simple, effective, and consistent with board funding policy. And with that, I will hand it over to Lisa to cover those options.
Great, thank you, Mitch, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Happy to be here. I don't get to talk to you very much anymore because Mitch does it all, which is great. It's our understanding at OSA that the intent of this bill is to try and have no cost by reflecting money that's in the benefit improvement account plus excess funds that are in the plan right now. So that's our understanding. And what we tried to do is come up with two options of how you can achieve that within the bill. So we've discussed this internally at OSA, put all our actuarial heads together, and this is what we came up with. Two options of what can be added to bill language that will achieve that goal. The first one, which I will say is our preference at OSA, and I'll talk about why it is our preference, is to modify your minimum contribution rate policy. The second option is to come up with some kind of rate offset or rate reduction that will be used for years in the future. So going to the first option, and also too, I just want to say, we can do whatever the board prefers. Either of these options can be done. Just one tends to be simpler and I think achieving your goals, but either can be done. So first, the minimum rate policy. The bill as it's drafted right now has put your minimum contribution rate policy in statute, right? So the bill draft right now is already putting that 90% or 100% minimum rate policy in statute. So you would not need a new section in the bill that talks about this goal of trying to have no cost, right? So it would just flow in the bill without anything kind of putting a spotlight on specific language. So we could adjust that minimum rate policy. And one of the things we looked at, which Mitch is going to actually share some results with you, is instead of it being 90% once the funded status is 105% or higher, it would be 80%. Okay, so that's one option. One of the reasons we like this is, again, it's simple and understandable for board members, future board members, the legislature, and sometimes simplicity for the legislature is a very good thing when they're looking at a bill. If there's complications in a bill, sometimes it can, maybe raise some red flags for them. The other reason we like it is it applies to current members, future members, employers, and the state. It just applies across everyone in a very simple and easy manner. The second option is to create an offset. And I think how the language could be written in that one section that Jacob talked about would be something to the effect of a future rate reduction that recognizes assets from the BIA transferring into the plan. So some language like that. The question is, how do we calculate that contribution rate, right? Does it have an actuarial basis for it? Is it some random rate? How long do we reduce future rates? Do we reduce it for the expected future service of our current membership? What about future new hires? And so So there's some complications there, but again, it can be done. Okay, so either of these options can be done. As your actuary, we just prefer option one for its simplicity and applying across all future members. I will say though that, you know, we are here for you. So I also wanted to take this opportunity to remind the board that we are your actuaries. I know that when the legislature starts, you know, we have a hat of being the actuary for the legislature, but we don't take off our hat for the Left 2 board. So we are here during session. If there are questions with this bill that you have, and you can, you know, funnel them through staff or directly to us. But I just wanted to remind you that we are here to help you. So if questions are coming up and you need assistance with how to explain any of this bill, because it is quite a big bill and there's a lot of components to it, we are here to help you. So don't forget that, you know, we don't not become your actuary during session, and you're only your actuary during the interim. We're your actuary all year long. So I just wanted to share that. And then I also want to reiterate what Mitch said, that the reason we wanted to speak to you today is to make sure that we share some of the things that are going to be in an actuarial fiscal note that might be different than what you're seeing today. We don't want to surprise you. Depending on how quickly the bill drops and moves during session, we may have an opportunity to get the fiscal note complete and share a draft with you before it actually is submitted to OFM, but it really depends on how quickly things move. But we just didn't want to surprise you. We wanted to try and bring everything to you that will be included in an actuarial fiscal note. And this component on funding policy changes, if it's not clear in the draft bill, then our office is going to have to make assumptions about what the bill does compared to current law. And so the clearer we can get the language in this bill, the better our fiscal note will match with what your expectations are. So that's all I had to share on this, but also I'm happy to answer some questions before Mitch then walks you through what some projected results could look like under these two options.
Questions for Mitch? We'll go on. All right, Mitch.
All right, let's go ahead and look at some results. So these are the projected results I promised off the top. This is output from our projections model. We have looked at this at prior board meetings. I think this is a really good tool to understanding how policy options play through on an expected basis through the system as we go into the future. Just my standard caveats on looking at this sort of stuff. We're making a ton of assumptions about the future here. Things like salary growth, the amount of new hires, and the big one, investment returns. Under all of this analysis, it all plays out exactly like we assume. We know that's not going to be the case, but this gives us a good sense of what it could look like in the future. So with the caveats aside, let's take a look at what the actual projections look like. So what we're looking at on this side is current law. So this is current law with no benefit improvement, no nothing. This is just what Left 2 looks like today. So on the left, I have a projection of funded status, and on the right, I have the total employer contribution rates that our model is estimating for future biennia. Taking a look at the funded status first, at about 110% in 2021, expected to ramp up to just north of 130% by 2030. The big increase that you see through the 2020s, that's the system recognizing the deferred asset gain from the large return in 2021. It plays out in 2028 as the system has then recognized all of those gains. For the contribution rate table on the right there, the 23-25 biennium, those are the ones that are already been adopted by the board, the 8.53%. Starting in the 25-27 biennium, that is when the board's new 90% minimum rate policy kicks in. So that 8.32 is under the 90%. I believe in the 2019 valuation, we were showing you 90% minimum rates that were in the 7%-ish range, around in that area. It's higher now because of those new economic assumptions. That lower investment rate of return raises the minimum rate. So current law, now we're adding in the draft bill. So this is, again, this is the draft bill without any of the funding policy adjustments that Lisa discussed. So the draft bill is obviously in blue here, starting with funded status. Not really unexpected here, just a general decrease in funded status across all levels. Ultimate funded status drops from about 132 to about 125%. Contribution rates starting in the 25-27 biennium and then moving forward, they increase by about 0.65 to 0.7%, kind of wiggles around a little bit depending on what biennium we're looking at. And that's, as I was saying before, this is a benefit improvement to those minimum rates. These are projected minimum rates, again, 90% of the minimum rates, and these minimum rates are reacting to the new benefit improvement under the draft bill. So as you might have guessed, I'm going to add a green line now. So now this is the green line with, this is the draft bill with the 80% minimum rate change that Lisa talked about. So instead of when funded status is over 105%, the minimum rate is now 80% instead of 90%. So starting with funded status, not a big change in funded status. I was initially a little bit surprised by this. And it's really the fact that LEF 2 is a more mature plan now. It has quite a bit of assets under its belt, especially after the 2021 returns. And so changes in contribution rates don't have as big of an impact on the funded status as they did in the past. Looking at the contribution rates under the lower min column heading there, starting in the 25-27 biennium, drops all the way to 8%. So that is actually comes under what current law is. And as we step through each of the future biennia, it rises slightly, but stays under current law throughout the rest of this period I have up here, but also if we kept taking this out into the future as well. So if we were to price a bill with this lower minimum rate provision in it for the funding policy, we would actually show a 25-year budget savings because these new contribution rates are coming in actually below what current law is. So on this slide, I wanted to give just a quick example of what the other funding policy option, just the flat reduction. So I just selected a 70 basis point flat reduction for illustrative purposes only. As Lisa was saying, there is a whole host of things that need to get figured out to determine what this calculation would actually be like. The actual calculation is going to vary in a number of ways. How big it is, when it starts, the duration it applies for. But the 70 basis points, again, just a reduction in those draft bill rates, not a big impact on funded status. And then looking at the contribution rate table, drops you right back to around what current law would be on a projected basis for LEF 2. Again, just illustrative purposes only, and then all the same caveats that Lisa talked about apply. Just not exactly sure what this calculation would yield and then how long it would apply, and then what budget impacts would then look like over a 25-year period. So with that, that does wrap up our material today. Lisa, you can feel free to add anything else, and we're happy to take questions as well.
No, I think that's perfect. The only thing I would add is I would reiterate Mitch's last comment here on the 25-year budget impact. So again, depending on what this offset is, how much it is, how long it applies. So does it apply for kind of a standard amortization period might look like 15 years. So if it applied for 15 years, then the fiscal note may show, costs or savings in that 25-year period. It's hard to say right now. Yeah, it really just depends on what that offset amount is and how long it applies.
All right, are there questions for Lisa or Mitch? Just checking the screen.
Hi, can you hear me now? This is Mark Johnston.
Hey, Mark, I got you on there now. I see it in the chat as well. So go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to work the technology here. So I had a question about slide number 11. The summary, maybe it's slide 2, summary of estimated results.
Yeah.
Impact to June 2019.
I gotcha. Yep.
Okay. So what I heard Mitch say was that the investment returns from 2021 and the BIA assets were not reflected in the liabilities on that slide. Is that correct?
So, yeah, Lisa, please feel free to jump in if you have some corrections here. So the liability, the liability is independent of the assets. So what we're doing here in this slide, the total liability change is us just saying, what is the total add of liability due to the benefit improvement? We then run that through our model, adding assets later. So the asset return for 2021 doesn't actually have any impact on the total liability change we're showing on this slide.
Yeah,
so it's not included. I'm sorry, it's not included in the BIA assets then.
It is included in the BIA assets because what we did is we took the June 30, 2021 figure for the BIA assets, and then we discounted it back 2 years to 2019 using our assumed return. So we still reflected the, I think it was 31.5% return in the BIA going from 2020 to 2021. But then when we moved it back to 2019 to line it up with our total liability change, we discounted it back with only a 7% investment return, which is why when we are looking at this slide here, we can see a increase in the BIA between the draft bill and SB 5453.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mark, just to add, we're really just trying to get everything on an apples to apples basis. We have to put everything on one date. So you're comparing, the same liability value or present value date with the asset present value date.
Okay, that answers my question. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Are there other questions for Mitch or Lisa? Bear with me, I just got to check the screens. All right, I'm not seeing anything else right now. Okay.
All right, thank you for your time.
Lisa, Mitch, thank you very much. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge the quick turnaround on this. I know that from our last meeting to now, I think we, as a board and those people who are following us, watching this virtual, we know that with the work that you've done in that kind of that 30 or less than 30-day period is remarkable. So we acknowledge that. We thank you for your time, and your entire team did a great job. So we'll continue to work with you guys.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you as well. Stay safe for sure.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Director Nelson. So
yeah, so actually going to go back to Jacob here.
Thank you, Jacob. That's what I was wondering. Yes.
No problem. Okay, so it's going to be the board action today is going to be a two-step process. The second step will be whether to endorse legislation or not this upcoming session. But the first possible board action in front of you today is to address the issue of the current funding policy not recognizing this transfer of funds from the BIA into the trust fund that Mitch and Lisa just briefed you on. And so those two options they discussed are option 1, the board can vote to modify the minimum contribution rate policy from current policy of 90% to an 80% rate floor. And then the second option is to offset future contribution rates, to develop an offset that recognizes future contribution rates and recognizes the transfer from the BIA.
Thank you, Mitch.
So, Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Go ahead, Mark.
So just to speed up, instead of talking about what we want to do before we actually have the motion, I'd like to make a motion to adopt option number 2, to utilize the offset for future contribution rates that recognizes the benefit improvement account transfer. And then I'll speak on that motion at the appropriate time at the pleasure of the chair.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? I think that's Senator Rivers. I think I've got you as a second. Thank you very much. I'll jump back to Mark for your comments, and then I'll open it up.
So I speak in favor of the motion I just made, and for a number of reasons. So I think this option results in a reduction of contribution rates compared to current law. It maintains the funded status of the plan of well over 100%. And it also meets the intent of the legislature to modify the current benefit formula for left 2 members when the legislature created the benefit improvement account in 2008. And one last comment I'll make is that it's our fiduciary responsibility to listen to our experts, in this case, the actuaries. And what I heard Lisa and Mitch both say, as representing that actuary's office, is that option 2 is reasonable and complies with all actuarial standards and practices. So I'm very confident and comfortable with speaking to support option number 2 because of what our actuaries have said, that it's doable and it's reasonable and it makes sense. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Are there other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Pat. I'm looking as fast as I can, so thank you.
I just want to make sure I'm not stepping on anybody either. I agree with Mark on everything he said. And one of the things I heard, especially through our actuary and our fiduciaries and our responsibilities, is what I heard was number 1 was easier, simpler, but number 2 is doable. And in this type of situation, listening to both options and the presentation, 2 seems to be more in line with what we're trying to do. And that's why, at least from my standpoint, so I'll be supporting option 2 also.
Thank you, Pat.
Mr. Chair.
Who's Senator Holy, my friend?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to touch on maybe some presentation aspects of this. If we went with actuarial option number 1, there's a chance that would present poorly in that we were not very clear about our intent to contribute money out of the benefit improvement account here, and yet we're just looking for a benefit improvement. I mean, this option number 2 shows that we have some skin in the game, and we're willing to contribute to the maximum capacity of what we have available that is significant in order to accomplish this. And I think in politics, a lot of times that it isn't just a matter of something being structurally sound or actually streamlined and easy to define or describe to the legislature, that sometimes people have different skill sets, and that's a problem doing so. I think that actually having skin in the game is more important here, and showing that we're not asking the state to do something with the rest of the money that we have in surplus that we're not willing to contribute to and be part of ourselves here. So there's a lot of different reasons why actual option number 2 really does make sense.
Thank you. Are there other comments? I see nothing in the chat. No hands up. All right, before us, we have a motion to adopt number actuarial option, geez, number 2. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Alrighty. Thank you very much for that, Mitch, or sorry, Jacob. Then I think the other action was before us was the board action. So either option number 1, endorse draft bill language, or number 2, which take no action. I think Mark, you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd have another motion.
Go ahead.
So I move to adopt option number 1 to endorse the tiered multiplier benefit bill draft that includes the actuarial option number 2 that the board just approved.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Dave makes the second. Thank you, sir. Discussion on this. Mark, did you want to say anything?
I think the two go hand in hand. And so the bill and the option do the same thing. They reduce rates, maintains the status of the plan, funding status well over 100%, and it meets the intent of the legislature. So I think it's a reasonable thing to endorse the draft bill language.
Jason.
Yes, to segue from what Mark had said, it also fulfills the goals of this board, which is to create opportunities to recruit and retain people into these career fields. I think this is a huge step towards that. So I would like to be on record in support of that. And I'd also like to be on record that I think this is momentous for us. And I also think it's momentous that Mark Johnson, who's the longest serving board member, has been around long enough to make this motion and see these efforts by all the people that work very hard to come to fruition. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jason, for your comments. Ade.
Yeah, thank you. I'm pretty much in line with what all of my colleagues have spoken to. I think in the past year or so, some of the employers, we've been having trouble actually recruiting. And we actually often pay sign-up bonuses, to be able to attract good staff onto the board. I'm hoping that this plan will actually give us an opportunity to be able to compete better, with other states, to be able to retain and be able to recruit good employees. I think when employees are happy, I think it's a great benefit to the employers as well. So I think this is one of those things that I'm hoping that will make our members happy to serve in the state of Washington, and in the process, make it easier for the employers to be able to recruit and retain employees. So I totally on board with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ade, for your words. Other comments? Seeing none in the chat, no hands up. Before you is board action to adopt item number 1 to endorse draft bill language. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries to adopt. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Nelson, I think we are at item number 6.
Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. Item number 6, the administrative update. I'll make it brief. You heard today the results of the financial audit from the office of the from the state auditor's office, and they are actually going to be conducting a second audit, which is called an accountability audit. That happens periodically for state agencies. So more a review of policies, make sure some of the non-financial stuff is in place. In any event, we just had the entrance conference for that, and the results will be available sometime early next year. So we're just beginning that audit process. Stakeholder Outreach, Jacob was at the State Council of Firefighters Executive Board meeting the other day to answer questions about the proposed bill, the bill that you just endorsed. The Fraternal Order of Police also has an e-board meeting early in January. I've been invited to Zoom into that for the same thing, to answer questions about the tiered multiplier bill. And then finally, I wanted to mention that this is Audet's final meeting with us. He has gone above and beyond. You guys will remember earlier this year where he retired, but he has continued to serve on the board even after retiring until his replacement could be identified by the Association of Cities and appointed. And so that I want to commend Audit for his good advice to me. We've had a number of great conversations over the years, and you've been an excellent board member to serve, Audit, so thank you.
I think we all have the same feelings. Audit is, Jason and I were talking this morning, and we both came up with the same word. Audit is a good man. A man of a good, strong principle, strong integrity, doing the right thing for the right reasons, and greatly appreciate his work and his time serving our board. I'm glad, I was thankful. Audit and I also had a chance to talk, and I was grateful that he stayed through the end of this process. You know, I understand and recognize the AWC's ability to appoint and have somebody who they choose to recognize and represent their interests. But I was really just thankful that Audit stuck through this process, especially on this issue. We've been working on this for a very, very long time, and he has asked a lot of great questions. I believe he has represented his party or his interest group very well. And equally important, he has been very representative of our interests as left two members. He gets it. He's one of those people who understands his role, but also understood the big picture of what we were trying to accomplish. And I'm grateful. You're a good man.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dennis. And I think I really appreciate the support and the relationship that I have enjoyed with all of the board members and the staff. It has been a great pleasure. So thank you all, and happy holidays.
Yeah, well, you're not leaving yet. We got to go to executive session. you're not getting out of it.
I'm going to put that in there just in case I don't speak again.
Yeah, you're not getting out of it that easy. And then I did hear also, and I take it as, I'm hoping good news, and I hate to even put the senator on the spot, but Senator Rivers, if she's still with us, I'm hoping, is that, maybe she can correct us, is she going to stay for a while? I'm hoping. So I don't know, Steve, if you've heard anything different, but
only what I read in the papers. We'll have to hear it from the senator herself.
that's what I'm hoping to. So this is a great board. And Jason, and I know some people obviously are going to check off. We will adjourn here shortly to executive session. Probably going to last in the neighborhood of about 15 minutes. But before we do that, adjourn our regular meeting, I just want to make sure publicly, because there's some people who check out. What we accomplished over this last year, a lot of it is credit again to our team in Olympia, Steve and your staff, for putting the language together, the background, the work, Lisa and her team, and Mitch and DRS. None of this is possible if we do it by ourselves as individuals. And collectively, I'm very thankful. A unanimous vote to move forward with something like this. In the words of Jason, this is momentous, or monumentous. This is probably one of the biggest things we will see, and it meets exactly what the intent of this board was when we had our thoughts back in the year 2001. So thank you for all of your work as a board, and then Steve and your team as well. Thank you. And then Lisa, I still see you're on, and to your team as well. So, all right. I don't think, Steve, we have anything else before our group. We do have executive session. And for the announcement purposes, Tor, I'll make sure I get this right. We will adjourn to executive session for the discussion of performance of a public employee. Not to, I would say we will be back in, we'll say 11:40. I think we can do this in 15 minutes. I'm very comfortable, just a review. It's probably gonna take us 5 minutes just to get over there, figure this all out. So before we do that, Tammy, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Do we have a second link for this session we're going to be jumping to? Just want to make sure that we all have that somewhere.
Yes, sir. Tim sent that to you guys. I believe
you all
it was
should have
on.
received a second link titled for executive session. Does everybody have that in their email?
Did that just come? Was this again this morning, or?
I believe it was sent on December 8th.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Yeah. Just making sure everybody's got it. So.
I do not have it on mine.
Okay, I'll try and I will see if I can send you one real quick.
Thank you.
Everybody else?
I have the one, Tim, I think the one you sent on the 9th, is that correct?
I think it's the. Tim, you want to just go ahead and send it to the board real quick again? Just make sure we all have it.
He's on it.
Hoping you're all going to be able to see it pop in your inbox right here real quick.
And just a quick question for the sake of clarity for any potential public participants there. So board members will be logging off this. Public members of the public can remain for any potential action that may arise when we come back out of executive session. Is that correct, Tammy, procedurally?
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yes, and what I'll do is I'll just put a holding screen up while they're in exec session. I'll pause the recording since there won't be anything going on, and when they return, I'll begin recording again.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we all have the information. So. All right, looks like it's popping up right now. You should be seeing this. All right. Or where'd you go? I lost you for a second. Procedurally, I think we just adjourned, right? We're not adjourned. Yeah. Help me out, Steve. I forgot where we are on how.
No, you're not adjourning. You're just going into executive session.
Okay. All right.
And then you said 11:40 earlier. Is that still enough time, or do you want to do 11:45?
11:45. 11:45 will be great.
All right.
All right. So we will break now. We will go into executive session. We will come back at 11:45. Seeing no other business, hopefully, to happen after that. This is a brief update. So, all right. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the other link. All right. We'll go ahead and call our meeting back to order. And for the purpose of the record, I think, Tammy, we are recording. Is that correct? I think I heard that.
Yes, sir.
All right. For the purpose, we have completed our review. We had a review of the performance of a public employee. We completed that. There is no action to be taken by our board. We have completed our work as far as our agenda for our meeting for December 15th. At this point in time, we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and second is adjourned. For the record, Ade made the motion to adjourn.
His last meeting. His last meeting. Good job.
Thank you, Audit.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
All those in favor say, I'll say aye. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. You gotta be back.
Aye.
Aye.
You can say bye. Bye works too. All right. Yeah.
Hey, Audit, don't be a stranger. Don't be.
Yeah.
It's not late.
He's retired. He will be a stranger.
Thank you all.
You guys take care. Merry Christmas.